It started like any ordinary day in the bustling subway station, a sea of commuters rushing past each other, lost in their own worlds. Among them was an elderly woman, carefully clutching her purse as she navigated the chaos. But lurking in the shadows was someone with darker intentions. The thief, eyes darting like a predator, zeroed in on the unsuspecting woman. In a matter of seconds, he made his move, snatching the purse from her hands and bolting through the crowd. The woman cried out, her voice trembling with fear and disbelief. Some people turned to look, but most kept moving, unwilling to get involved. Little did the thief know someone had been watching everything unfold. A man sitting quietly in the corner, his face partially hidden under a baseball cap. That man was none other than Keanu Reeves. What happened next is the kind of moment you'd expect from an action movie. But this was no script. With a calm yet focused demeanor, Keanu stood up, his eyes fixed on the fleeing thief. He didn't shout, didn't make a scene. He simply started walking, blending into the crowd as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But he wasn't just walking, he was closing in. As Keanu moved through the crowd, his footsteps steady and deliberate, the chaos of the subway seemed to blur around him. People were too preoccupied to notice him. Just another commuter in a jacket and cap. But beneath that calm exterior, there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. He had seen what happened, and something in him couldn't let it slide. The thief, meanwhile, was weaving through the crowd, clutching the stolen purse tightly against his chest. He glanced over his shoulder now and then, but there was no sign of anyone following. He must have thought he'd gotten away clean. What he didn't realize was that someone with sharp instincts and years of training had taken notice. Kenner's mind raced as he subtly tracked the man. This wasn't a movie set where he could call a cut if things went wrong. This was real life, unpredictable and dangerous. He didn't know if the thief was armed or desperate, but he wasn't about to let the elderly woman's cries for help go unanswered. Still keeping his distance, Keanu noticed the thief heading toward a quieter exit at the far end of the station. The question wasn't just what he would do next, but how far he was willing to go. The thief slipped through the exit, emerging into a dimly lit alley just outside the subway. He slowed his pace, glancing around to make sure no one had followed him. Satisfied, he leaned against the wall, rummaging through the purse with quick, nervous hands. His breathing was heavy, a mix of adrenaline and relief. He didn't notice the faint shadow that had followed him all the way from the station. Keanu had kept his distance, blending effortlessly with the ebb and flow of commuters. Now, standing just beyond the alley's entrance, he paused. He wasn't sure what he'd find. Was the thief dangerous? Was he just desperate? Keanu didn't like to assume the worst about people, but the way the elderly woman's voice had cracked with fear stuck with him. This wasn't about being a hero, it was about doing the right thing. Back in the subway, a few passers-by had stopped to help the shaken woman. She described her stolen purse, her voice quivering, and wondered aloud why no one had stepped in to stop the thief. Meanwhile, in the alley, Keanu took a step forward, his boots lightly scraping the pavement. The thief's head jerked up, and their eyes met for the first time. The moment was tense, loaded with uncertainty as the air seemed to hold its breath. The thief froze, his eyes darting between Keanu and the purse in his hands. For a moment, neither of them moved. The alley was eerily quiet, the faint hum of the subway in the distance the only sound. Keanu's expression was calm but firm, his steady gaze locking the thief in place. He took another step forward, slow and deliberate, as if he didn't want to startle the man. "I think that belongs to someone else," Keanu said, his voice low but carrying an undeniable authority. The thief's grip on the purse tightened. His mind was racing, torn between fight or flight. He wasn't sure who this man was or why he had followed him, but there was something unsettling about the way Keanu stood there, confident, unshaken. The thief wasn't used to this kind of confrontation. Most people either ignored him or ran the other way. "You don't know me, man." "Stay out of this," the thief spat, his voice wavering despite the threat in his words. Keanu didn't flinch. He took another step closer, his hands relaxed at his sides. I don't want trouble, but you're better than this. His words hung in the air, thick with tension. The thief's breathing quickened, and for a split second, it seemed like he might just throw the purse and run. But then, something in his posture shifted. The confrontation was about to take a turn. The thief's body tensed, his eyes darting to the alley's narrow escape routes. He didn't want to give up the purse, there was too much riding on it. But before he could make his next move, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed behind them. Both men turned to see a subway security guard entering the alley, his flashlight beam slicing through the shadows. Hey, you there! The guard barked, his voice firm and commanding. The thief's panic hit a boiling point. Either getting caught wasn't an option, not with everything he had to lose. In a flash, he shoved the purse into his jacket and backed away, his eyes darting between Keanu and the guard. I'm not going back, he muttered under his breath, his words carrying a desperation that hinted at a story far more complicated than simple theft. Keanu raised a hand, motioning to the guard to hold back. Wait, he said, his calm tone cutting through the tension. But the guard didn't slow, his hand hovering near his radio. The thief, cornered and frantic, grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the ground, holding it in front of him like a shield. The stakes had just skyrocketed. Keanu stood in the middle of it all, watching the man's shaking hands, the guard's growing impatience and the weight of the moment pressing down. This wasn't just about a stolen purse anymore. There was something deeper at play. The alley seemed to shrink as the tension thickened. The thief gripped the pipe tighter, his knuckles white, while the guard moved closer, his flashlight steady. Keanu stayed between them, his calm presence like a barrier holding the situation from spiraling out of control. Listen, Keanu said softly, his voice cutting through the silence. Nobody wants this to end badly. Just put it down. Whatever's going on, we can fix it. The thief's breathing was ragged, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. You don't understand, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't have a choice. My kid, he's sick, and I can't pay for the medicine. His words tumbled out in a rush, a confession born of desperation. For a moment, even the guard froze, caught off guard by the raw honesty in the man's voice. Keanu nodded slowly, his expression softening. That's hard, but this isn't the way. Let me help. The thief hesitated, his grip loosening on the pipe. Then, with a deep breath, he dropped it to the ground, the clatter echoing in the alley. He pulled a purse from his jacket and handed it over, his eyes filled with shame. The guard reached for his radio, but Keanu raised a hand. Wait, he said, locking eyes with the thief. I believe him. Let's give him a chance. As the guard reluctantly lowered his radio, the twist came. The elderly woman from earlier appeared at the alley's entrance, supported by a concerned passerby. She had followed the commotion and overheard the thief's plea. If what you're saying is true, she said gently, her voice steady despite the day's events, then keep the money. Help your child. Just don't hurt anyone else. The thief's face crumpled, overwhelmed by her kindness. Keanu helped mediate as the moment shifted from tension to something unexpectedly human, a connection between strangers. The thief left the alley with a promise to make things right, and as Keanu quietly disappeared into the night, it became clear he hadn't just witnessed the scene. He had changed it. As the thief disappeared into the night, clutching the purse's contents in a second chance, the alley grew quiet again. The elderly woman, still shaken but surprisingly calm, looked at the guard, then at Keanu. Thank you, she said softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. I don't know what would have happened without you. Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile. You're stronger than you think, he replied, and it's never too late for people to turn things around. The guard, though still wary, seemed to relax. He offered to escort the woman back to the subway, ensuring she made it home safely. As they left the alley, she turned back once, But Ken was already walking away, blending into the city like he had never been there. Back at the station, life continued as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Commuters bustled about, unaware of the small act of courage and kindness that had just unfolded nearby. For Keanu, it wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about the simple belief that stepping in, even for a stranger, could make all the difference. Sometimes the quietest heroes leave the loudest impact without ever needing the spotlight.